experience of writing a variety of types of manuscripts, including the first Torah scroll known to have been created by a woman. And we're very excited to have Jen here with us today. As usual, the comments can be put in the chat. You are mute for the duration until we come back to you at the end. It is so nice to see so many of you. In fact, I'm still, I'm still quelling with fond memories of being in Spain with a lot of you. And special, we at CSP are offering another Spain trip. It seems that there was a large number of people who could not connect with us for the trip we just went on. We took a lot of people, but there still were a lot of people who wanted to come. So Julie Harris, my fellow conspirator on the Spain trail, the trail of Andalusia, Soferet, and Spain, is going to be joining me in May of this year. I think the dates are May 20th to June 3rd, something like that. I'm not exactly sure yet, but around that range. And we can take another group to Spain. It would be our pleasure to do so. So stay tuned for informational material on that. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jen Taylor Friedman, who's a great hero of mine, but not only a great hero of mine, a co-conspirator and collaborator as well. And Jen, just so you know where we are in this odyssey, in the past couple of weeks, we've explored images of women with books, in books, which is kind of an interesting and quirky topic. And we've talked a little bit about the halachot, about the laws of writing Torah scrolls, their involvedness, their particular beauty, their stringencies, and we raise the issue of women in connection with Torah scrolls, both being in contact with Torah scrolls and in fact creating Torah scrolls. And here we have an opportunity that we would not have had any other time in history to have a live conversation with someone who's actually a Soferet and done those things. But you are also the mother, so to speak, of the famous tefillin Barbie. Who is a Barbie doll who wears tefillin, as any woman who desires to take on that mitzvah, of course, should. And it is very, very exciting to have you along. So thank you, Jen. How did you get into this game? What was your first kind of encounter with safrut? By the way, Jen is also the author of a wonderful new book called How to Write a Torah Scroll. I actually have my very own copy of it, but I just lent it to a student the other day, intended to hold it up. Do you have one there you can hold up, or?
It's in my kid's bedroom and she's fast asleep.
Okay, well, okay. So tell us how you came into this game and what you love most about it.
Well, so I got here just by putting one step in front of the other. Everything seemed to make sense at the time. There wasn't really a grand plan. It was a sort of, I love doing this thing and I love doing that thing. And when you put them together, this is what you get. So I like making stuff for people. So before I came away to college, I used to make dolls' houses and costumes for stage and whatnot. When I left for college, that was less portable than ideal. And then when I left England to go to yeshiva in Israel, you're really limited to just the one suitcase, not even the back of your dad's car.
Right.
Oh, somebody's holding up a copy of my book. Yes, there it is. There's How to Write a Torah. And it's got gorgeous pictures done by the magnificent Matt Tonti. So when I went to Israel, I was really limited to what I could carry. So I had writing things, calligraphy. It's a very portable kind of hobby. And
yes.
You can make beautiful things for people with calligraphy.
Yes.
And when you learn Hebrew, you can write ketubas for people, and that makes them happy. And when you learn a lot of halakha.
Yes.
Well, when you learn a lot of halakha, as you tend to do when you go away to yeshiva, um, you can add that into the mix. And when you add calligraphy and halakha together, what you get is the sacred scrolls. Because there's no halakha around who can write a ketubah. Anybody can write a ketubah. A printer can write a ketubah. It's nicer if you have them done by hand, because it means that your happy married couple get full say over what it should look like. And you get the energy of the happy married couple sloshing you around as you're writing it. Beautiful thing to do.
So you
but
say
they don't have the kind of serious halakhic body that you have with the sacred scrolls.
So if I may interrupt, you have what was interesting about what you just said is that it seems that for you, doing sacred writing, whether it's on the level of ketubah, which anybody can do, or the sacred scrolls, transmits a mutual energy. In other words, when there's a couple, when there's a patron, when there's someone who's receiving it, you are somehow in communication with the artwork, obviously, and you're communing with your own soul, presumably, about how to create and how to do it. But you feel a connection to the patron, be it the happily married couple, et cetera, et cetera. Yes.
Yes, this having a mutual energy, as you describe it, between the individual doing the creation and the object being created is very much in line with how Rabbinic Judaism thinks about a lot of things. So when we want items to be made for mitzvot, we like the people who are doing the making to have at least a passing interest in the mitzvah being done. Perhaps nowhere is this more true than with the sacred scrolls.
Yes,
we consider that the energy from the artist gets somehow transferred into the object.
Yes, and what I find fascinating about the sacred scrolls, be they mezuzot or tefillin or sifrei Torah, is that although the letter form and the shape is so standardized, right, and so regulated. We talked last time about the 10 points of contention on a letter yud, right, and so specified. The spirit and the artistic impulse and, dare I say it, the style of the sofer or the soferet always manages to come through, and I think that is an astounding representation of the relationship between, let's say, a conservative tradition being overlaid with the creative genius of the artist involved in that tradition. Yes?
Yes, even though you can't sign a Torah scroll as you could another manuscript, and the identity of the scribe is always lost amongst the letters, you have to work quite hard to suppress the individuality of your handwriting. Of course, it has to conform to many details, as you've discussed, but even so, within that, my teacher, Judith Friedman, always says scribes are not machines. And it's true, scribes are not machines. And it's very hard work to make your writing appear as though it is mechanical. It's better if you can tell the difference between scribes. It reminds you that scribes are not machines.
Yes. Today in class, I teach a class called Detectives in the Archives, where each student gets a medieval manuscript here at Vassar, and they get to sort of deconstruct it from, not literally, right? The binding and the way it's put together, and the quires and the script and the writing surface, the parchment, and et cetera, et cetera. And today we were comparing 3 leaves of the Gutenberg Bible, the first printed Western book, which we happen to have in the library. Vassar is a very lucky institution. With a couple of leaves from Paris student Bibles from the 1300s, and a larger Bible in 2 columns. And what was interesting about that was that although the Gutenberg Bible was printed in movable type, which meant that the letters were fairly or very uniform. The spaces between them were uniform. The spaces between the sentences were uniform. The paragraphs, the number of columns, right? It had a certain character. But for me,
Indeed.
the handwritten Bibles, you could just taste the scribe on them, so to speak. And that's really a very, very beautiful thing and a very, very meaningful thing. So speaking of signing one's work, I think that it might be interesting for our public to see something I want to share on the screen.
Yes.
1 second. Share screen. 1 second. Have to find that. Give me a second. Yeah, share screen. Advanced. Share portion of screen. Oof. Okay. So what you're looking at is the final leaf of a scroll of Esther. And unusually, for this scroll of Esther has a couple of liturgical poems at the end. One is found standard in many prayer books, and it's the Asher Henia. It describes the story of the book of Esther in poetic form. And then there's another poem here. This is an Italian poem, a Hebrew poem called Ach Ze Hayom Kiviti. And it's written mishubash. It's written like it's on a chessboard, as you can see, in beautiful script that is somewhere between, I would say, the standard Stam Torah scroll mezuzot tefillin script and that of a medieval manuscript. It appears we have to be detectives here, okay? And this is a song. It says, "Ach ze hayom kiviti lashir et nikmatzar bo matzati ra'iti yesha min ha'metzar." So there's a song, and then at the very bottom, down here, you can see. It says as follows, and I'm getting very close to the screen because it's small here. It says, Anochi Yona Esther Soferet katabti zot hamegillah v'siyamti ota yom sheni b'shavua hey yamim lachodesh Tammuz. I, Yona Esther, the scribe, female, wrote this Megillah, this scroll of Esther, and I finished it on the second day of the week, on the 5th day of the month of Tammuz, which is the 7th of July in the evening in the year. And then here you see these letters have little dots over them. Vatissa Chesed, which means it's a quote from the book of Esther. And she, Esther, found favor in the eyes of the king. And if you add up those letters, you will find the Hebrew date. And then it says, Po, Montreal. And then it says, Al tishti alai chetat im timsa'u va shkiot ki isha mi'aneket anochi, which means, please don't hold me at fault if you find errors in this scroll, because I am a nursing mother. So this Megillah, this scroll of Esther, was written by a woman in Montreal in July, a couple of years ago, and she signed her name, which you can do. And she was a nursing mother, and she says, please don't find fault in me if there are errors. This quotation, don't find fault in this work if there are errors, is actually has its origin in an 18th century, maybe it's a little earlier, Yemenite codex of the Pentateuch, of the 5 books of Moses, written again by a female scribe. But this colophon and this final column of this Megillah was created by Jen Taylor Friedman. And this is a collaboration that she and I worked on. I had been for many, many years interested in a book called The Bird's Head, or in my parlance, The Griffin's Head Megillah, in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And I had loved its script. Here it is on the bottom, right? This is the script of the Griffin's Head Megillah. And I thought, what if I could commission a scroll that would be the Scroll of Esther version of this Haggadah? I love the script. I love the illustrations where all the Jews appeared with the heads of griffins and all the non-Jews had blanked out faces. I just thought it was so cool. I had written about it. So I contacted Jen, and Jen proceeded to create this Megillah based on the Haggadah script, but conforming to the parameters of what's needed in a Megillah. She produced, over the course of a year, the scroll, which is exquisite, including the blessings. One second, this is, you don't want to see that part, including the blessings before the reading of the scroll with such charming details as this part, which you say at night. So it has stars and a moon. Do you see that? Very, very gorgeous. And a beautifully scripted and scrolled scripted scroll of Esther, which has distinctive details which we can talk about. But look at the beauty of this scroll and look at the individuality and really the exquisite sensibility of the calligraphy. Here, there's a hand. Sometimes it's Jen's hand, sometimes it's her husband's hand. You can tell her husband's hand's a little hairier when it appears, which I thought was a great deal. Here is the part where you say there was a Jewish man in Susa, the capital, whose name was Mordecai, right? And he had a niece called Esther, and everybody says it aloud. So that's pointing here. The scroll is called a Hamelech scroll. At the top of each column, the word the king appears. Why? Because the name of God does not appear in the Megillah, and the hint to divinity and sovereignty is this word Hamelech, so it's decorated beautifully like this. So you can see, I mean, very, very many beautiful details. The 10 sons of Haman, the final blessing done absolutely exquisitely, the final piyut, and then that poem I told you about. So this was a very interesting and challenging collaboration. One of the things I learned here is what it's like as a patron, that was me in this case, to work with a scribe. And Jen was a very accommodating scribe because I wanted weird things. Here's the thing. I love to read the Megillah. המולך מהודו ועד כוש, שבע ועשרים ומן המדינה. But I'm very bad at remembering where all the notes go. And sometimes ahuvahu, who knows every vowel in the Bible, hi ahuva, I hope you're feeling better, right? Sometimes I screw up the vowels. Now, you can't write vowels and cancellation marks in a scroll, right, Jen? That's the law, correct?
Which kind of scroll are we talking here, Mark?
Well, yeah, the Scroll of Esther. So we didn't write the vowels and cancellation marks. We simply created little blue designs and little red designs, right? The little blue designs are the cancellation marks, and the little red designs are the vowels. So we sort of got around that by creating a scroll that had those features and yet didn't officially have those features because they weren't written in black ink, right? So they're sort of ornaments between the lines. So this is a sort of tricky way, I think, of getting what we wanted. What were the challenges of writing this scroll, Jen? I'm curious.
Oh, challenges. Well, the client is always the main challenge in any project. When you asked for that.
Yes.
The beautiful thing about this scroll was, of course, the non-standard script that it so inspired you. This is a medieval script, and you see script just like this in medieval Torah scrolls, those that survived from the period, and there are a few. So you see script very much like this. So it used to be completely the acceptable kind of script, even for Torah scrolls. But script has developed over the intervening, 600 years. There are a few things that the medievals did that I simply cannot stomach. The main one is that the medievals joined both legs of hay to the roof. Now, as moderns, that's dreadfully surprising. We're used to having hay looking like a dud with a little floating speck inside its tummy.
Wait, to clarify, they made a hay look like a chet, correct? Is that what you mean?
Essentially, yes. It looked different from how they made chet. They made chet with subtle differences. So it's not that hay and chet were completely indistinguishable. They do rather appear so to the modern eye if you don't know what you're looking for. So for this script, we separated all the legs of hay because that was just a little bit too medieval. The same goes for kuf. Medieval kuf is very often joined to the roof on both sides. We couldn't quite do that. So we separated up. So some of the details of the letters, we updated the halakha, but in general, we made the shapes similar. I had to work out what kind of hand techniques, what kind of pen, what kind of finger motions the scribe of the griffin's head Haggadah was using, and replicate those, get good at writing those before commencing the actual Megillah. And then working out how we were going to indicate the verses to be repeated, and how we would indicate the chapter stops, and whether we should do the vowel colors the same as the cantillation colors. All sorts of fun questions. And then yes, and what to do with the poems and the blessings and so on. And again, you can't put poems and blessings in a Torah scroll, but the rules for a Megillah scroll tend to be somewhat less stringent. Like, we allow illustration in a Megillah scroll. We allow bits at the beginning, bits at the end. There are certainly views that say that you shouldn't, but equally there are views that say that you may. So it's that you may.
So we accepted the ones that say you may, and what was really wonderful about this is that we were working in what I regard as a tradition that is especially apropos to women's participation. After all, in the Megillah itself, it says, Vatichtov Esther, Bat Avichail. Esther, the daughter of Avichail, wrote the story of Purim. If she wrote the story of Purim, surely, right, the story could be written by a female scribe. And indeed, the earliest illuminated, that is decorated, painted scroll of Esther that we have is a early Baroque scroll made by a woman named Estrelina in Italy, who puts her name in the colophon as well. So in a way, not choosing to begin with a Torah scroll among the public scrolls, because I didn't want to commission something that was a private scroll. Mezuzot are rolled up and put in a case. You don't see the script on the mezuzah. Tefillin are rolled up and put in the leather coverings. You don't see them. I wanted to commission something that would be public and that would be sort of part of liturgical use. And this is important in an egalitarian, traditional community. So we have a little shul called Kihilas Zichron Tzvi, which is a traditional community. That is, we do everything liturgically. We don't leave stuff out. In fact, we do stuff that even the Orthodox don't do anymore. We do medieval poems and songs, piyutim and zimirot that are not usually done. But we firmly believe that everybody has to take Yiddishkeit, Judaism, seriously, regardless of genital equipment. Let me say that again. Everybody takes it seriously, regardless of genital equipment. And therefore, women are called up to the Torah, and therefore women receive synagogue honors, women participate fully, and people of all genders. And that's important to us. And it was important to us to have a scroll that was written by a woman. A few years previously, I commissioned a Torah scroll from a female scribe called Hannah Kabansky in Jerusalem, who created the scroll, which looks like a standard Megillah, except that there's a separate sheet of blessings, and on the blessings it says, "Thank you, God, for making miracles," and it usually says, "for our ancestors in the masculine." Right? This says, for our male and female ancestors, imotenu ve'avotenu, and that's sort of an indication, along with the colophon, which appears on a separate sheet, that it was created by a woman for an egalitarian congregation. We appreciated that very much. But when the opportunity fell into my hands due to the generosity of the Fishman family, patrons of ours at Vassar College, to create this Megillah, I jumped at it. And I really wanted it to have the marks of this medieval book, and also the hand of a woman involved. But I'll tell you one other thing. There are many sofrim who know meticulously the laws of the creation of these sacred scrolls and sacred books. but not many are willing to be creative, progressive, and actually this is regressive because we're going back to a medieval script, right? But interesting and quirky, as Jen has been, and has been a tremendous pleasure to do this. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a little bit more about the laws of writing a Torah scroll, and talk about a Torah scroll that's about to be commissioned, which will be the topic of our final session on Danger Women with Books next week. And I hope you'll all show up for that. But I want to unveil something that no one has seen yet except Jen and myself. So when I created this scroll, I didn't create it. When I commissioned this scroll as a patron with Jen, the artist, the Soferet, I wanted our students to learn the story of Esther, to learn the midrashim, that is the rabbinic elaborations on the narrative, and to create illustrations for the scroll that would bring in all sorts of details from the midrash, from rabbinic tradition, from medieval tradition, their own interpretations of the biblical verses. And so I conceived of a class around this scroll, and we held the class. The students created their ideas, and this year, I found a very talented artist at Vassar who has begun to illustrate the scroll. Now, when you look at the scroll, you can see that the script is medieval in the sense that it is Jewish Gothic, right? It has all that pointiness of the Gothic, and there is no more Gothic artist, I think you will agree, than the late Edward Gorey, who was a fascinating, morbid, eccentric, excessive artist who did many wonderful works of art. And the student artist that I picked for this project, Anna Kozlowski, who may appear on a future episode, we will see, illustrates in the style of Gorey. So here, for instance, here, for instance, is Haman speaking to the king and telling him that if the Vashti is not expelled or expulsed or killed, right, all the women, right, will rebel against the kings. The king is hiding behind a pillar, and Haman, who has a Hamantash-shaped hat and Hamantash-shaped ears, is pointing with a pointer at this primitive scroll PowerPoint, right, which depicts the rebellion of the women. And it's all done in this very charming style. Now, you notice that as in the Griffin's Head Haggadah, the non-Jewish characters don't have faces. It's a wish in the Griffin's Head Haggadah for the effacement of the enemy, right? And so they don't have faces. Here, in unison with Jen's beautiful script, and here you see the end of a chapter. That's how we dealt with the ends and beginnings of chapters. So this one is about the rebellion, right? And it says, Umedaber k'lashon amo. That's the end of the chapter. And you have that space. And then you have here the new chapter. Achar hadvarim ha'eleh keshach Hamas hamelech Achashverosh. Achashverosh Zachar Vashti Ve'es Asher Asosa Ve'es Asher Nigezar Aleya. So the king remembers Vashti and realizes he's without a woman, and so he initiates a beauty contest. And here's the king and his associates, and here are many beautiful women in the form of animal-headed women, but the griffin-headed Esther, modestly traipsing along here, is the star of the beauty pageant. Now, Esther, of course, was the daughter of Mordecai, the niece, I'm sorry, of Mordecai. The niece or the adopted daughter or the wife or the lover. We're not quite sure who she was to Mordecai, but here it says, Mordecai the Jew, who lived in Shushan Habirah, and here out his window, we can see the pinnacles and peaks of the capital of Susa. And it says, Asher Hagla Mirushalayim. So here's Mordecai sitting in his chair, reading from a scroll. And on the wall is an image of the Beis Hamikdash, of the temple in Jerusalem. And then it says he was raising Esther, his niece. Here she is on the floor. And she has a scroll and she's drawing in the scroll, right? She's because she's an artistic type. And my favorite part of this illustration, on the wall here behind her, you see, that's her baby picture. And since she's a griffin, the baby picture is an egg. And it says Hadassah beneath it, Hadassah, her name, right? So utterly charming illustrations, a couple of more. Here she is, Vatilakach Esther. Esther was taken to the king's household by the eunuch. Here you see the eunuch. Here's Esther crying. Here's Mordecai, little mezuzah on the door of this Persian tiled home.
The villainous
right?
mustachios.
Yes, he's of course mustachioed, and he's a eunuch. So he's dressed eunuchly. And a couple more. Here's Esther refusing any gifts that are given her. She only takes what has come to her with her into the palace. Here are her women, who of course are faceless. And in the corner here, we have two creatures that we introduced. This is Clive, who's a small dragon, and this is Jasper, and they sort of comment on the action. Clive is offering a jar of perfume, and Jasper, hanging, his bat-like creature, is offering a necklace, right? So we have those commentators. And just one more illustration. Here we have Esther. This one's not quite finished yet, but here she's refusing food offered to her by Jasper, a piece of cake, and Clive, who is schlepping along a bunch of grapes, because Mordecai has told her that if she refuses to do this task, salvation will come to the Jews from another place, right? So I think it's entirely charming and extremely well done. And to me, what I like best about it is how the illustrations complement the script that Jen has created. So hopefully, God willing, by March, we will have a completed scroll. Jen, you're going to have to teach me how to sew together the panels. You sent me some, I think it's gut, right? What do you do with that? You have to use a needle and thread. How do you do that?
It's tendons, not gut, but yeah, it's needle and thread work, but it's very easy. I've got a video for you.
Okay, good. I'm looking forward to doing that, and then the scroll will be used, which is to us very, very exciting. So
my advice is don't erase the page numbers until you've stitched it together. That will help.
Right, because very good, because we could stitch it in the wrong order, and then then we'd have to undo all our work. Okay, well, I will consult with you, and maybe, Jen, we will bring you. I don't know what your Purim plans are, but maybe we'll bring you along for a Purim experience, or we can all get together. Hi all, I see you all, and have a Purim afternoon Megillah reading with the Megillah scrolling along on Zoom on this in this forum. That would be a really, really fun thing to do. Okay, so we did that. That was something we did. It was a dream, Jen, and it came to pass. We have another.
Fun being a patron.
Yeah, it's fun. It's so much fun. I've written about patrons for years. It's so interesting. Let me say, I've written about patrons for years, and every time I go to a conference, and I say, well, patron is like this. Jew walks into a manuscript store and says, I want a Haggadah, right? And the artist, who's not Jewish in the Middle Ages usually, right, says, a Hawada? And the Jew says, a Haggadah. It's like, it's like a prayer book. You mean like a book of hours? Well, not exactly. It's a prayer book for Pesach. Pesach. Yeah, Pesach. Pak. Oh, Pak, Easter. No, not Easter. The Jewish Easter, right? And they have a negotiation. So every time I brought this up, Jen, at a conference, they'd say, oh, your imagination is running wild. But working with you, I could see daily how we would consult on these things. And what's your experience with patrons been? Are they generally directive? You don't have to give names, but I'm just curious how it's been to be the artist in the ambit of a patron.
Ooh, you always want to find out what your patron is after. What do they want this investment to do for them? Normally I write Torah scrolls and Megillah scrolls, and you want to find out, is this a community effort? Is it a one-on-one? Is it in memory of somebody? what's the energy we want here with this? And you want to know practical things like what size do you want it? People who are commissioning a Torah scroll very often want it to be fairly small and non-intimidating. They don't want great big behemoths that only one person in the community can lift up. They want a nice, sensibly sized Torah that everybody can lift up at the end of the reading, but not teeny tiny ones that you need tremendously good like to read.
Right.
And
so can I ask,
yeah.
have you had any very eccentric experiences with patrons, or was the Griffin's Head Megillah the most eccentric thing you've written?
I think yours is the most eccentric thing.
Good.
Yes.
Okay. I always have to be the most eccentric, so that's fair, right? But
although I did write
Torah,
some mezuzot on a ship in the Mid-Atlantic, which I thought was quite eccentric.
You wrote it on a sheep in the Mid-Atlantic. There was a sheep.
It was also on a sheep.
Ship.
It was on a sheep on a ship.
That's good. That's very good. Can I ask something? This is a little personal, but how you wrote when you wrote the Megillah that you were that nobody should fault you because you were nursing a child. How is having this this little person in your life change your perspective on safrut, if at all?
You have to be a lot more focused when you have a bit of work time. You jolly well have to make the most of it.
Yeah.
But she's learning that the Torah is something that lives in our house, and she's learning her letters off a Torah scroll, because I've got one being written at the moment.
Wow.
She's learning very important lessons about mistakes, that mummy is working and should not be disturbed, and if you go galloping into the studio shouting, likely mistakes will happen. But mistakes are fixable. Even in Torah scrolls, mistakes are generally fixable. And even if it's a mistake in the divine name of God, which is tricky to erase, you can't really erase divine names of God. That's tantamount to erasing God. Even if you make a mistake in that one, you just have to replace the sheet. It's not the end of the world. So she's learning important lessons about mistakes in Torah. Torah is not this impossibly high stakes game. It's heaven or nothing. She's learning that it's an ongoing process that's very human and very forgiving. That's the first lesson she's got about Torah in our house, which I think is a very nice lesson for her.
This audience knows that I'm not given to emotion very much, but that is really deep and very, very important. I want to sit with it. Yeah. So can I ask, how did you come about doing the first Torah that we know of, written by a woman, that woman being you? Who requested it? Where does it live now? And what was the sort of, you spoke so articulately and beautifully about your daughter. What was the sort of emotional tenor of that commission?
So this commission was from a community in St. Louis who had correctly observed that amongst their leadership, they had many women. Amongst the lay leadership, all the committees are run by dedicated women, not by design. It just sort of falls out that way. That we have female cantors, we have female educators, we have female presidents, we have female rabbis. And they said, we want to commission a new Torah scroll. We should follow through on our vision of egalitarian Judaism and have a woman write it. And so they asked around, and the path of their asking happened to lead to me. At this time, I was serving an apprenticeship with a Reform Soferet named Neil Yemen, who worked just outside New York City. So I was working on repair with him, because Torah scrolls, you don't just write them and launch them. They require maintenance. You have to keep on checking back in with them, because as they grow older, they get flaky, bits of them stop working quite right. Torah scrolls need going over every decade or so to see how they're doing, replace any any dodgy
Yes.
bits. So I was learning that, and so my congregation in St. Louis said to Neil, "Do you know any women who can do it?" And Neil scratched his head and thumbed his non-existent beard and said, "I just about might." So then, back to the conversation about patrons, we had a chat to see if we were mutually suited, and we decided that yes, we liked each other and we could work together on this Torah project. And that was thrilling. It was jolly exciting. It was primarily exciting to be writing a Torah scroll, because when you've written a few Megillot, you've repaired some Torahs, there's a rush to bringing a sad, flaky, miserable Torah that's got sticky tape on it and broken seams and sad letters. It's a wonderful thing to bring that back to being a full, complete kosher scroll again. But at the same time, making something mechadash that's brand new is also a special kind of thrill. So doing that for a Torah for myself was terrific. And the historical aspect of it could not be denied, but that kind of came second.
So can I ask a larger question about one of the things we discussed was the idea that if a woman in this sort of a traditional, seriously halakhic context, if a woman takes on mitzvot that are time-bound, that would not normally, and positive, that would not normally apply to her lechatchila from the beginning, but she takes them on, Rashi's daughters and tefillin legendarily, or other mitzvot, she can acquit other women, etc. I want to talk a little bit about the question of Torah scroll, and do we require of our scribes that they be halakhically observant? What's your view on that? And what's your, I'm sure you've discussed this a million times, but these people haven't heard it. What's your raya? What's your support for writing a Torah scroll for a community that's that would be acceptable for halakhically observant Jews?
So you have to look at this question starting all the way back in the Talmud, where the Talmud is discussing who can write Torah scrolls and tefillin and mezuzot. Who can write these for us, for the Jews, and who can't? And the discussion shapes up there as being the question of who is a fit person to transmit the Torah in the first place. So we exclude non-Jews, for instance. They don't really have a stake in the Torah the same way the Jews do. We exclude people who are massive heretics. We don't let those write Torah scrolls because they've got the wrong headspace, I guess. We exclude people who have done damaging things to the Jewish community. So people who sell out the Jews to the Romans, people who are prepared to stand up in the public square and say mitzvot are a load of rubbish and Shabbat is nonsense. And we exclude also from this job of transmitting the written Torah people who aren't quite part of the community in various ways. So we exclude from that slaves, because in halakhic thinking, slaves aren't really full Jews. They've got other obligations. We exclude children, because again, children aren't full members of the Jewish community. They don't have mature brains. There's a school of thought that says that we should exclude the mamzer. If you recall, the mamzer is somebody of dubious parentage who is, the Torah says he should be set apart from the congregation. So there's a school of thought that says even the poor old mamzer is not even his fault. He shouldn't write the Torah. And in this category, in the ancient world, we include women as well. Women are not really people, they're unpeople. They often go along in halakhic texts with children and slaves. So they often group together like that. So unpeople don't write the holy texts. Okay, fair enough. If you believe that women are unpeople, then it certainly makes sense that they shouldn't write holy texts. And over time, our understanding of are women really people has matured, let us say. Thankfully, you start getting women who can do things like get university degrees, dangerous things that might overheat their brains. Then in the 20th century, so women surgeons, women doctors, all these dreadful things. It's shocking. And you get, in the 20th century, you start to get women rabbis and women cantors, and you see that basically first in the reform movements, mostly popularized. And it takes time. It takes time for women to break into being ordained, being allowed to do responsible ritual Jewish things. But it happens. We build the egalitarian world, and whether it's reform or renewal or conservative or traditional egal on the fringes of orthodoxy, we have the context now of a Judaism that says, actually, women are not unpeople. They are real people, and they can do all the same things that men can do, and their brains won't overheat and the universe won't implode. That women should have the same access to ritual as men, and they should have the same responsibilities as men, whatever that looks like in the community that's talking about it. So what that looks like in a very traditional egalitarian community is going to look different from a reform community. And this is fine. It's all contextual. So then you want to make sure that your scribe, going back to the idea that the person who transmits the Holy Scrolls needs to be somebody who's vibing with those scrolls and vibing with the people who want those scrolls. Vibing is not Gemara language, but that's what it's getting down to. So if you're a reform community and you want a Torah scroll, I think that it's quite important that your scroll is written by somebody who respects Reform Judaism as a valid form of Judaism. This is perhaps more important than being strictly Shomer Shabbat or strictly Shomer all the other mitzvot. I think the critical thing there is that Reform Judaism, the Reform community that you're part of, sees you as somebody who would transmit the scroll for them. Equally, I think communities that, for instance, make a point of being open to, let's say, gay and lesbian Jews, shouldn't have a scroll written by somebody who thinks that gay and lesbian Jews are repellent. Like, that's not nice. You don't want your Torah written by somebody who thinks you're not good. You want your Torah written by somebody who thinks you're great and valid and wonderful Jews.
Yes.
Because that's your Torah. So when you're finding a scribe, I think it kind of doesn't matter if they're a woman or not. If they've got, yes. If there's somebody you want carrying your Torah for you.
So Jen, this is very interesting to me because I almost expect, I don't know why I expected it, but I almost expected to hear some kind of dodge or justification, or here's a loophole in the halacha. You actually, you go deeper. In other words, you regard the person who prepares a scroll as a sort of partner of Moshe Rabbeinu, a partner of Moses on Mount Sinai, bringing the Torah to the people. And the bottom line is not trying to explain or justify how this can be the case, but rather that it should be the case that the person should vibe. By the way, vibe in Yiddish means a woman, so right? Vibe or right, or vibe or chime, right, with the sensibility of the community. And actually, I hope that the From Police are not listening, because years ago I was trying to find halakhic justifications to be egalitarian, blah blah blah, and I think now that I hear you, I feel bolstered because I feel on the same page. My page is that if I'm very traditional. I'm shomer mitzvot. I keep Shabbos. I keep kashrus. I keep the holidays. If egalitarianism, when I get up to the pearly gates, right? If egalitarianism is the sword on which the good Lord wishes to impale me, so be it. I did everything else, you know? And I think the
Yeah.
bottom line is that we do what we do with integrity. And if selecting our Soferet should be concordant with that kind of integrity. Thank you. This is
It's
really,
about,
really,
are you Yirei Shemayim? What does
yes.
Yirei Shemayim look like?
Yirei Shammai
Yirei
means someone
Shemayim
who
look
has,
like? I
who
have to
has
write that down
connection,
for you.
who's in awe of heaven, in awe of God. Yes.
In awe
This
of
is
heaven. Yeah.
wonderful. We have some questions. I'm going to address some of the questions and then some of them, of course, with Jen. Some are pretty easy. The pointing hands in the Megillah, as we noted, denote, thank you, Nancy, denote places in the Megillah where the congregation reads aloud the passage. So the reader reads and then the congregation reads aloud and then the reader reads. These are sort of peak moments in the scroll. And somebody noticed, Rena notices that Esther is a lefty in Anna's drawings, and asks, how can a eunuch have a mustache? It's a fake mustache, right? How can Rena, how can you have such beautiful long eyelashes? Just asking, okay? Judith missed on why Esther is a griffin. It's a long story. It's a long story. There is a Haggadah, right? There's a Haggadah on which this is based, in which all the Jewish characters are griffins. Griffins are lion-eagle hybrids. They represent transcendence and royalty. They represent a certain martyrs of a certain community who were compared to lions and eagles. There's a lot of reasons. And this Megillah riffs, R-I-F-F-S, not R-I-P-S, riffs off that Haggadah. A couple of other things. Will some form of the Megillah will be available after it's done, like in book form? I don't know if somebody wants to sponsor that. That's something that that could happen. Is it printed on vellum or paper? All sacred scrolls for use in public reading are scribed, not printed, right? Hand scribed on parchment, right? Not paper. And with traditional kosher ink, yes, absolutely. Why does Haman have a face? Haman actually doesn't have a face, Mary. You could look at him again. Okay, now a couple of other questions directly for Jen. Jen, if a woman's scribe is menstruating, does she abstain from the project during her period?
I usually address this question by asking, why would you think she would? The answer is generally something along the lines of, because we associate menstruation with ritual impurity, and we don't want to put ritual impurity and Torahs together. When you go a bit deeper into the sources, you see that the only kind of ritual impurity in halakha that bothers Torah study, Torah scrolls, is the kind of ritual impurity that only men's bodies can produce. So the Talmud thinks that men's bodies are uniquely barriers to Torah in that way, and that women's bodies aren't. So when you get down into the halacha, it's really not a problem for ladies to write Torahs, considerably less so than men in that way.
Fascinating. There's a question here about tefillin Barbie, which we will get into in a second. But the last question I want to answer is about the Torah scroll we are commissioning. So we have an egalitarian community called Kehilas Zichron Tzvi here in Poughkeepsie, New York. But the Torah scroll we're commissioning is not for the congregation only. It is going to be a learning and teaching tool about Jewish diversity. I just got a notice that my computer is running out of juice. So not Jews, but juice. So I'm going to connect it as I speak to you. A few years ago, we had a congregant who passed away at a ripe old age and supposedly left us a hefty sum, something like $60,000, to commission a Torah scroll. When that person's family found out that he had done such a crazy thing, they began a battle in court to, one second, to invalidate his desire. And we have since had to put the project on hold. What was the project? Well, the project I'll describe next time briefly is this. There are a bunch of stringencies about writing Torah scrolls, but there are also a bunch of creative expediencies, such as something called osios mishunos, strange letters, an aleph with two horns, a kuf that goes in a curlicue. These appear in perfectly valid Torah scrolls that were accepted in a variety of communities all over the world. We wanted, as an egalitarian traditional community, to commission a Torah scroll in the script of the oldest surviving Torah scroll, one created in Biella in Italy in the Middle Ages, but also using all the eccentric letters we could find in all the Torah scrolls of the world to demonstrate that although the tradition has a running line, that the tradition is itself conservative, passed down, traditional in short, it is also exceedingly creative. We want to use this Torah scroll in the synagogue to demonstrate its halakhic validity, and we want to tour with the Torah scroll, an especially constructed ark that can travel, to show students and schools and communities the diversity of Jewish traditions within the potential for traditional arts of safrut. And there's one person in the world who could write that scroll, and that person is in the box next to me right here. And I will put a link in the chat that you can see what the project is, and if you wish to contribute to it, you can. I will actually be talking about it next time in a lot of detail because it's a fascinating project. So that's the Torah scroll we want to commission. The flowers at the top of the page indicate Hamelech, the sovereign, right? It's a way of illustrating that word which appears at the top of each page. And finally, the moment you've all been waiting for. Jen, tell us about Tefillin Barbie. All of a sudden, Barbie is big news again in the world, right? Almost as big news as Oppenheimer, right? Tell us about Tefillin Barbie.
You want to stick a picture up?
Oh, I don't have. I will find. Go ahead. You talk, and as you speak, I will find her.
Yes. It started as a very silly thing. You don't write Torahs during Chol HaMoed, during the intermediate days of festivals, so I was not doing very much. And I was having a silly chat with some silly friends talking about silly things. And one of the silly ideas was, what if you put some tefillin on a Barbie? So I did. And it turned out that many people had much stronger feelings about this than they did about the Torah scroll.
You mean censorious feelings, like they didn't like it?
The Torah scroll people were just sort of, meh, it's a Torah scroll, whatever. But the tefillin on the Barbie, whoa, now this is serious stuff.
Right.
It was either seriously inspiring or seriously detestable. Mark's put a picture in the chat, yes.
And I'll put it on the screen in a second, yes.
Yes. And what's going on, of course, is that the image of Barbie is hardwired into contemporary society as uber feminine and uber secular, really. You know, she goes around in a bikini half the time, and also becomes a doctor and a lawyer and you know, all these things simultaneously whilst wearing her bikini. And tefillin is still hard coded as very masculine and very religious. So putting the two images together really messed with people's minds in a way that I was not at all expecting.
Amazing.
Yes,
amazing. And it really took off. I mean, that's, you know,
really
Jen should be known as the woman who wrote the first Torah scroll that we know of, right? But she's known as the mommy of Tefillin Barbie.
I'm mostly notorious for the Barbie, yes. And it also turned out that people wanted to buy them. So my poor child, her exposure to Barbie is Don't touch those, they've got tefillin on. Although nowadays she helps me make the tefillin Barbies, and her tax is one of each kind of Barbie that comes through the house. So
Wow.
she's figured out how to deal with this
Right.
peculiarity of mummy's job.
Amazing. Well, this has been truly, truly a delight. You know, it's after midnight. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. You have to go to sleep. You have a child to make Barbies with tomorrow, and probably Torah scrolls to write. It's been a pleasure to see you. And I'm very, very much looking forward to talking about that Torah scroll. You can see in the chat our new inclusive Torah scroll is mentioned there before the Tefillin Barbie. And very, very excited to describe what that is and how hopefully it will come about. And Jen, you are the best. There really is nobody like you. It's, you know, very often people say that rhetorically, right? Oh, nobody like you, you know, but it is absolutely a pleasure to be in the presence of somebody who is, how can I say it? Literally making history. And we are thrilled and delighted that you could be with us. Thank you, everybody. CSP continues to program throughout the week. We love you. We'll see you next Thursday, and look forward to maybe going to Spain with some of you. The ones who were in Spain, tell the other ones how it was. And I promise I won't sing To Dream the Impossible Dream from Man of La Mancha, because that was one of the low points of the whole thing. But good night, and thank you for your kind words and comments. Hi, Mom. Bye. Take care.